Samba, we actually pull the pure native LM, and it's kind of wrapped in the screen. But basically, what that'll do is it'll tell us the version of Samba that's running. And if you see version 3.0.10, that's probably an OS X box because Apple decided to stick with that version and not update it for like 2 years. So if you see anyone running 3.0.10, don't own them really quickly. Like, give them some time to apply that patch or something. Let's see, what other demos do we have? Oh, right. So Rollops tool, the Perturba.com interface. For the last couple of months, they've only had this web interface up there. And the web interface was neat, and it showed you things like when you search for Flickr, it actually used Ajax to show the Flickr pictures in a different window. So if you search for like Jeff Moss, you actually get a picture of Jeff Moss right there. So it was really cool. It was like, hey, look, there's that guy. I know him. And so in the last, probably last week or so, they released a GUI version of that tool, which is all written in Java, and their backend's written in Java as well. And it's just full of a whole bunch of little transform files that transform an email to a phone to a name, things like that. So I can actually demo his tool, and hopefully he won't get mad for me showing it off before he's made a big noise about it. But it needs net access to work for the most part, but has a really cool UI. So I want to show off the UI real quick.
Yeah, when you're using a tool like this, I mean, let's say you come across some website that's got a picture of the target's dog. You never know when that's going to be useful. Maybe the dog's name is Buffy and his password's Buffy.
So if I had network access, that would actually work a lot better. But if anyone who does have network access, just go to Perturba.com. You can download the GUI client for it. So I basically dragged a domain over and then called it defcon.net. And at this point, to find all the information about defcon.net, you just double-click. Actually, you could right-click, and it has a big list of things you can find. So, for example, we can find the email address, the phone number, and any site information associated with this domain. Or we can find out just the email addresses, just the sites, just the phone numbers, similar addresses, PGP information at that domain, things like that. Or just down here at the bottom, do all transforms. And one of the transforms that's neat is actually documents and files. This will actually go to Google and say, okay, search for anything on this domain, a file type, PowerPoint or doc and things like that. So it goes through all the legwork of finding documents on these servers for you. And that's why I'm such a fanboy of this tool. So, sorry.
Yeah, I've actually found sites where there'll be like an admin directory that's not linked anywhere, and inside the admin directory is a Word doc. You open the Word doc, and it's like, how are internal networks configured? The admin passwords are. Look for the Word docs that the sysadmins are putting up, thinking no one can find them.
So in this case, you see, it doesn't really do anything without net access, but if you have that, it'll actually spider the whole thing out, and it creates this little graph you can play with in real time. Does anyone use the IDAPRO 5.0 or 5.1? Okay. Well, the folks who have, like 2 of them looks like, it has a cool interface for basically going from function to function using a graph. And it's got the same thing here for following nodes of information around. So if you find out that, Bob is a coworker named Jim, you can actually double click on Jim and then pull up the same information for Jim that you have for Bob. So you can keep actually just following kind of the web of trust or following kind of the links of associations. So you can actually do your whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon with this if you really felt like it. Search for Kevin Bacon and keep clicking and eventually find your name in there somewhere. Hopefully. So that should work. I haven't actually gone that far into it so far, and I don't like Kevin Bacon, so I haven't really done that yet.
Yeah, the trusts are the real points of weaknesses in a network or between systems. What people trust what people. Let's say you can't hack your target network, but you can hack his best friend's home network, and he happened to have given him a shell on his machine at work. Well, then you have a foothold through a different, it depends what the scope of your test is, but it gives you different footholds into a network that you wouldn't normally have if you're just focused on, this IP address range and nothing else.
Some other demos. So we talked a little bit about, emailing links to clients, and what you don't want to use for that is your own email client, because it gives away things like your user agents and things like that, and it's just not information you really want to share with your target. And it's not really the best tool for the job in a lot of cases. Recently, in the Metasploit framework, we actually added support for sending email directly from the framework. And for folks who've used like Core Impact, it's already a feature available there. I'm just going to give you an example of how you can easily use things like the ANI module and spam them out to everybody on the all list real quick and then get shells. I don't actually have a mail service set up, so I can't demo the exploit itself, but I can show you the module. And it's under Modules, Exploits, Windows, Email. And here we've got some 0-day that you can ignore. And then we have this that I'm going to hide real quick. All right, 6 on, off. So we've got the way the Metasploit modules work is each module has a mixin, and the mixin defines what the API of that module is. So for the scanner modules, we just included the auxiliary scanner mixin, and then we included TCP or UDP or whatever we're doing. In this case, we're going to include the exploit remote SMTP deliver mixin, which basically provides functions for sending email into our module. In this case, we've got our absolutely huge ANI exploit, and it's kind of ugly to navigate through like this, but let me find the send email function. Send something, send mail, looks like, send message. All right, so one of the nifty things about how the ANI vulnerability worked is that when an error, the function that actually the overflow occurred inside of was wrapped by an SEH handler by the library. What that means is when an overflow occurred and you actually trashed the entire stack, the user never saw anything. It just kept on running. So just do, everything's fine, keep on going, not a big deal. So the great thing about that is you can actually brute force ANI images to get the right return address for a given target just by sending a whole lot of them, putting them all into one email message, and then referencing them in sequential order from inside an HTML web page by their content disposition ID. So it's kind of hairy, but basically the code for that ended up being create a web page. Inside the web page, let's see, where are we? HTML. It's kind of ugly here. Basically, create a standard HTML template, a bunch of random gibberish inside of it that won't make much sense to the user. They'll open up going, hey, what the hell is this? Down near the bottom, you can see to create the actual message, we just do message equal rex mime message new, creates a new mime body. We set the subject based on what the user set or random value, set the to, the from. The mail server that you want to relay this through is actually automatically provided as an option. So you can relay it through their mail server, your mail server, however you want to do it. And finally down here, we add, for each ANI image we want to include as part of the brute force, we add an ANI attachment type. And we give them random extensions. We give them like .bmp, .jpeg, etc. And the way we reference it, it doesn't really matter. We still get our shell. So that's it. And then you do send message and you're done. So if you want to send something that sends an MDN, the message dispatch notification stuff, to figure out who's actually there, where the email addresses are, where they come back from, you can use a Metasploit module like this under the auxiliary tree to send email for you and get those things back. So even if you don't really code very much, you can just grab one of these examples, copy it over, change like 5 things, and you're good to go.
One really great thing that large networks are doing is standardization. They're like, well, let's get everyone on the same OS, same patch level, same client. And I love that because that means that if I find one bug to get in, I can get it on every machine. And so, these sorts of ideas take advantage of that. Like, you can spam a whole network and get an idea of, okay, look, everyone's running this patch level or this client. They run Outlook for all their mail or whatever it is.
So here's another example. In this example, we're going to use another auxiliary scanner module, but this one actually does discovery of hosts and does that by doing UDP sweeps. This is another example of you don't want to look for every single port, every single service. You only look for a couple things that indicate enough information about the target that you know whether you want to go after them or not. So this module will actually go through and look for things like DNS servers, NFS servers, RPC servers, SNMP, TFTP, all sorts of little UDP services, and it creates a single socket and spams it out to all these hosts as part of the target. I'm not on the wireless now, otherwise I'd show you what you're running, but right now I can run it against the virtual machine. So the syntax for this is just set our hosts with your target, and that's about it. If you do show options, we can see the batch size. So we want to work in blocks of 256. Our threads are set to 1 because we're already doing 256 at a time. It's not a big deal. And we just type run. And my VM over here should come back. See, it's awake. There we go. All right, so we see we discovered NetBIOS in this host. This is UDP-only sweep. And one of the neat things about this module is you can set the source port of it to be another application that you know is allowed through the firewall or is less likely to be looked at by an IPS or an IDS. A good example of that is if you're trying to find every NFS server on the network, which is actually pretty common. You try to find NFS servers because they're wide open no matter what you do with them. A good way to find DNS servers without tipping off the admin that you're doing something is instead of querying through the port map service, the mount D service, or one of those other services used to actually initialize it, actually probe the NFS server itself on port 2048. And when you do so, send your packet from source port 53. And if you configure the beginning of your RPC packet correctly, it'll actually look like a DNS reply. So it just blows past everyone's firewalls out there, and when you do hit a valid NFS server, it'll come back saying invalid version, invalid opcode, invalid handle, depending on what opcode you send as part of your message. So Val talked about it a little bit as far as ways to sweep through and find NFS servers and bypass IPS and IDS, and we'll get into more about NFS and fun NFS tricks later on. See, well, we've got a ton of time right now, and I hate to rush into the next section because we've got a whole bunch of really cool demos, but they're all kind of tied together. So you don't want to just do the first one and then not go to the next one because it's not that much fun. Any questions so far? Wow, were they really boring or? Yes, sir. Sorry?
So you skipped over a demo earlier in the presentation. Let's see if I can get it out.
Okay. Let me pull that up.
Where did you say to find the slides?
They'll be on Metasploit.com later on tonight.
You get stand out the list and post.
Sorry?
Are you going to post them on your mailing list if you post the slides and the material?
Yes. So the question was, first thing was, we've got another demo we can do. I guess we'll go ahead and do that demo. Two, it was like, where can you find the slides for this? It'll be on Metasploit.com. And three, once we post it to the Metasploit.com website, will it be on the mailing list? And yes, to all of those, we will do it.
Oh, there's a question over here.
Just a comment, if you find somebody's got multiple MX records out there, you bounce the multiple MX records. Sometimes it maps off internal IP structure of the network, especially if it's large.
It's a good example. So the comment was that if the target domain has multiple MX records, you can try bouncing a message off each individual mail server. And depending on how that mail server reacts, especially with larger networks, you'll get internal information back from one mail server, but maybe not another one. So when you're trying this stuff, definitely try every mail server, not just one of them. And that's how you can actually specify the SMTP server command in the auxiliary module is one way to specify just this one mail server versus your local mail server, which will deliver it automatically.
So the second half of our talk after the break, while he's pulling this up, we're going to go really deeply into some of these subjects and show some demos of things like trust hijacking, SSH hijacking, Kerberos ticket stealing, leveraging NFS home directory servers to break into tons of nodes onto the network. So that's sort of a little overview of what the next half is going to be about. And some fun SMB stuff.
So one of the demos I was going to cover earlier, we actually already did. That was just the auxiliary UDP scanner. Unfortunately, the network isn't set up right, so I can't actually do the full suite. But that was a lot of fun. Another demo that we're going to go through, and we actually pulled it out because we didn't have enough time for it, is a different way to do virtual host detection. And a lot of times, if let's say you've got a big list of virtual hosts you want to try, and you connect to the web server, and you send / get / HTTP 1.0 host name something, and you get a big chunk of data back. How can you determine that that's a different virtual host from your previous virtual host? So if you have this giant list, a lot of times you can't tell. If you just do a byte for byte compare, that won't work because a lot of dynamic content will do things like show the latest user comment at the top, or there'll be banner ads being cycled into it. There isn't really a good way to determine this virtual host is actually different from this virtual host without visually recognizing that. So my solution to that, and actually what's going to be in Metasploit really soon, is you actually do the edit cost difference of each virtual host's web page. And for those who don't know what edit cost is, basically it's how many bytes you have to change in this body of text to make it equal to this body of text. So you get this nice metric out of it. Unfortunately, it's a really slow algorithm to run, so you only want to do it across about 200 bytes at a time at the top of the page. And if those match up, you go down to your next 200 bytes and so on. So the general technique for this, and there's a module that'll implement most of it, but I think it's only about a quarter done in this module. Here's an example of let me turn off the syntax. So basically, we've got a list of virtual hosts we want to try, like admin, localhost, web, exchange, HR, things like that. And we're going to go down this list and do get requests for each one of those. And actually, before we do that, what we're going to do is go to the main virtual host, the one based on the IP address or the main host name that we do know about this host, and we're going to take that page and get it 5 times. And between each of those 5 pages, we're going to compare the edit cost from that page to the page after and so on. In other words, how many bytes differ